Kristen would be in one space with awareness that the moment that she stepped into a different space, she would not know who she was or what she was doing. There might be 25 independent persons flowing through one physical body, and each of them has access to a different portion of the working memory. You're not all of you. You're kind of just this abstract conceptualization of a potential self. So for example, you walk up to somebody and you perceive their energetic attributes, and that becomes the entire reality of that moment. Rather than you being solidified in your entire sense of self as a physical person, perceiving another independent person. When neural data cannot thoroughly connect and effectively provide navigation, then new places and or familiar places might feel disorienting. You might walk into a store and everything feels profoundly overwhelming, but you don't know why. New places might be overwhelming or disorienting because the neural data can't give you the basic information about who you are, where you are, and why the you is where you are. My 27th thesis statement is that dissociation is an umbrella term to describe hundreds of unique experiences that may stem from undercoupled neural wiring, independent activity within the neurobiological social engagement system, brain-body dysregulation, or other neurobiological particulars. All of this energetic wiring, though, may be traced back to past moments of unfulfilled attachment needs that directly impacted the style in which the brain-body system became wired and then continued navigating and regulating through unfolding moments of personal experience. Thus far, we have specifically focused on how unique manifestations of dissociation affect long-term memory processing, storage, and accessibility. And this can impact navigation, regulation, access to autobiographical memories, abilities to move through action patterns, and an infinite myriad of experiences. Dissociation can also affect short-term working memory, which is a distinct neurobiological component from operations of long-term memory. Short-term memory uses pieces of information from neural wiring and awareness in the present moment to help us navigate our immediate moments. It's the way that we are able to understand what's happening right now and all the pieces that kind of go into those moments unfolding. Short-term working memory can help us connect different pieces of information through our processes of thought right now, and can also help us connect our moments. The moment that happened 5 seconds ago, 5 minutes ago, how they relate with this moment here, and how the next moment might arise from these unfolding moments. And all of this happens very automatically through unconscious activity. It affects our conscious experiences, but the operations themselves occur unconsciously, beyond awareness, based on automatic brain-body activity. Anytime we move rooms, you're in this room and your body moves to this other room. Anytime we shift engagement of our tasks, you were doing this thing, now you're doing this thing. And anytime we're flowing through a process of things, such as step-by-step instructions, our ability to maneuver those realities profoundly depends upon short-term working memory. For example, you might be moving through a process of household chores and you say, okay, I'm going to unload the dishwasher, I'm going to vacuum, I'm going to sweep, and I'm going to wipe down that one wall. When you're moving through those activities, do you do one and then do another and then do another, and there's fluidity between all moments and you understand who you are, where you are, and what you're doing? Or do you get halfway through the first task and you're like, wait, who am I and what was I trying to do right now? I'm actually not sure why I have this towel in my hand. It seems I was trying to clean something. I don't know. I don't know what I was actually doing here. Our ability to have fluidity between moments, fluidity while moving through life, fluidity while maneuvering ideas or tasks or concepts depends on activity of our short-term working memory. If you have a thought about, I need to go get this thing from this other room, do you move from where you are, get the thing, and return to where you were? Or do you get to the other room and you suddenly have no idea what you were even trying to do? You're like, I walked over here from another place I was sitting, but I don't know what was happening when I was in that other place, and I don't know what I'm trying to do now. While having a conversation with another person, do you listen and respond and listen and respond and flow through a fluid engagement of conversational interaction? Or do you listen, struggle to process what they're saying, and then feel very confused about how to respond because you didn't fully process who you are and how you might respond in relation to everything they were saying? All of this activity depends on working memory, and when dissociation disrupts abilities of short-term working memory beyond awareness, it can produce a wide variety of unique dissociative experiences. So even though our short-term working memory affects us consciously much more than the long-term memory affects us consciously, the activity is still automatic, meaning we're not consciously choosing how it's operating. We're not like, okay, short-term working memory, let me get in my neurobiological programs and tell you exactly how to do your job. All of it's happening automatically. So when these processes are disrupted, even though it affects us consciously in a way that we might be able to perceive more so than the unconscious memories being affected by dissociation, the underlying causalities are still automatic, unconscious, and beyond what we can immediately choose in the moment. When there are alternate states of neurobiological engagement, such as in uniquarters, which references my 7th and 10th thesis statements, then each state of consciousness may experience their own version or access to short-term working memory. So instead of one person having access to one sense of a short-term working memory, there might be 25 independent persons flowing through one physical body, and each of them has access to a different portion of the working memory. You could almost imagine a whole pizza being divvied up to all these different people. So the whole pizza is still being eaten by one family, as all these people in this one family are hanging out together. But they're each getting a different slice of it. And maybe it was a variety combo pizza. So these portions are Hawaiian and they've got ham and pineapple. And these pizza slices over here are just cheese. And these pizza slices over here are just pepperoni. And so instead of one person getting a taste of all the information in the pizza, these people have these pieces of information. These people have these pieces of information. These people have these pieces of information. Pieces, pizzas, pieces, pizzas, you know. And so if there's alternate states of consciousness in any type of uniquarter, whether they're independent people with total amnesic barriers, or any type of uniquarter, even if they're just different aspects of the self experiencing unique independent activity throughout the neurobiological social engagement system, then different aspects of self might each have their own access to short-term working memory, which means that all the different pieces of information that help us navigate life are being experienced by different aspects of the self that might not have instinctive ability to connect, communicate, and collaborate with one another. So imagine that you're in this room, you decide you need to go get your hairbrush from this other room. The physical body is like, I'm walking over here. You leave that room, you move to another room, and the short-term working memory is shifting its information to help you navigate a new environmental setting. But the state of consciousness that was here, who had the piece of information about, I'm going to go get my hairbrush, is a different state of consciousness than the parts who are experiencing short-term working memory here that's navigating a new environment because you left that room. Okay, you with me? Then the physical body is walking over here to the room where the hairbrush is. You shift to another environmental setting because you were in this room, you walked through this room to this room, okay? And now there's a different state of consciousness experiencing short-term working memory because of the environmental setting shifting the styles of automated stimulus. And so now this state of consciousness is experiencing the working memory at the forefront of personal realities and has no idea why they're in this room because the part of the self who knows about that had access to working memory back here, but not the pieces here. Okay? You with me? So when there's alternate states of consciousness or any type of unique order of neural wiring within the neurobiological social engagement system, then there may be different aspects of the self, each encountering their own pieces of short-term working memory, and then step-by-step things might not have connections. If you're having a conversation with someone, there's a part of the self who's listening and experiencing automatic neurobiological activity in this corner. And then you go to respond, but it's a different style of engagement, so the brain and the body slightly shift But because there's independent neural activity, now a different aspect of the self is at the forefront of personal experience and doesn't have access to the implicit energetic information gathered just 3 seconds ago from listening to what the person was saying. Parts of our consciousness experience automatic neurobiological activity. Parts of consciousness are the aspects of our self within the experience, while brain-body wiring and activity and unconscious operations are independent but being experienced by the parts. Okay? And this is helpful to understand. Parts of consciousness never choose these styles of experience. Parts of consciousness do not choose to experience life in these unique ways. Because brain-body activity is independent from consciousness. Consciousness is the self that we are in experience. The brain and the body are the vessel how our consciousness is navigating this physical human experience, and the wiring of that determines our styles of personal realities, such as unique dissociation affecting short-term working memory. But they are not the same thing. So our parts of consciousness aren't like, oh, nana, I'm over here with this piece of information, you can't get to it. Like, that's not how it goes. Like parts of consciousness aren't choosing these automated styles of realities. They're not choosing to have this shift where suddenly this other part is at the forefront of experience and doesn't have access to information from 5 seconds ago. So all the different flows about things that happen when we're having a conversation with someone, when we're moving by a step-by-step process. Okay, I'm going to do this, and then this, and then this. When we're navigating information and you're learning about something and you're connecting all these pieces of information to understand a new thing. When you're maneuvering physical reality and you're shifting environmental settings, like moving from one room to another room. All of these different components require fluid energetic intel through the short-term working memory. And when dissociation disrupts those processes, it can disrupt personal experiences of consciousness, including the automated way that self-essence has power to maneuver immediate realities. So in this example, if there's 25 independent inner persons, such as an adaptable consciousness condition, which references my 10th thesis statement in this case study, if there's 25 independent persons flowing through one body and they don't have instinctive connections, and each of them has a different piece of the working memory that they're connected to, then just to navigate everyday moments, connecting this moment to this moment, this piece of info to this piece of info, just all the basic stuff, navigating our seconds, minutes, and hours in everyday activities would require manual collaboration between 25 people. It would require manual collaboration. It doesn't happen automatically. You have to really work at it. Manual collaboration between 25 people just to try and have the short-term working memory functioning to navigate everyday unfoldings. And I know a little bit about this because this is exactly how I was experiencing life just 3 years ago. My short-term working memory could not do what it can do now. For example, I found a video where Kristen was trying to record her speaking about some of her ideas, and she would have this typed page, and she would look at it, and by the time she set the page down and sat up to speak, which is like a couple seconds, she had forgotten everything she had just looked at. This is just a couple years ago. And now I can look at my notes and speak here for hours while sustaining fluid access to what the idea was that I wanted to talk about and what I've been saying and what I am saying leading up to where I want things to go with what I am saying. But my brain couldn't do that before. I found videos where Kristen would literally look at this paper of an idea, read maybe a sentence, not like she was trying to gather a lot of info, read maybe a sentence, and by the time she set the paper down to look at the video to speak, she had forgotten what was there, what she had read, what it had said, because of her short-term working memory. But now I can read 5 paragraphs of notes, summarize it in my head, and talk about it here for lengthy periods of time because of how my short-term working memory is able to operate now. And it's all unconscious, automatic, and stems from activity in the neurobiological social engagement system, where the unconscious body-mind has learned how to navigate and regulate its own self from every nanosecond, from every year of life, in accordance with 16 plus roles with all these automatic priorities. And all of that unconscious activity affects how our short-term working memory knows how to navigate each moment, and thus impacts our parts of consciousness who are within these personal experiences. Another personal example is when I would move rooms. I would go from outside to inside the garage, to inside the laundry room, to inside the kitchen. And with every time I moved rooms or where I was, the stimulus of a different environmental setting completely reset my working memory. So when I was standing in the garage, I had zero memory of standing outside 2 seconds before that. While I was standing in the garage, I had zero memory, zero awareness about standing outside just 2 seconds before that. And then I would move to the laundry room, and by the time I was in the laundry room, I had no awareness or lucid knowledge about standing in the garage or standing outside, even though it was just a few seconds ago. And then I would move into the kitchen and has zero awareness about being in the laundry room, the garage, or outside, because every shift of environmental setting, the stimulus was different and completely reset my working memory. So the moments had no fluidity with one another. And to cope with this, Kristen would be in one space with awareness that the moment that she stepped into a different space, she would not know who she was or what she was doing. So she had awareness at this point, after a couple years into her case study work, she had awareness that this is something that was going to happen. And it's just, that's how life was being experienced. It is what it is, and we move through it to the best of our ability. So before Kristen would move to another room, she would summarize what she was trying to do, where she was going, and why. And she would summarize that into 5 words or less, ideally 1 or 2 words, very short phrases, because she couldn't remember these big concepts of I'm me and I'm going over here to do this. So she'd have to remember word like toothbrush light or something, like just a couple words, a couple key words that could trigger some kind of insight about what might be happening. She would summarize what she was trying to do and why, or where she was going, into a phrase, a very short phrase, and incessantly repeat that to herself while she moved through rooms. Let's say that she's going to look for scratch paper to write out some ideas because she's working on this project and she has these thoughts and these concepts, and she wants to go look for this certain style of paper that's in this one place and acquire some of that paper to go back and keep working on her project. Okay? Her short-term working memory wouldn't be able to tell her about what she was trying to do by the time she reached the paper inside the house. So she would stand outside the house, summarize what she was trying to do, and maybe it would be a phrase like paper project, paper project, paper project. Just key words associated with what she was trying to do. So she would incessantly repeat that to herself, usually out loud, because of how disrupted her internal cognitive processes were because of the thickness of dissociation and other trauma-related health challenges. So she would incessantly repeat that to herself. Paper, project, paper, project, paper, and then she would walk into the garage, paper, project, paper, project, paper, project, paper, project. Boom, everything is reset. She doesn't remember being outside. She doesn't remember what started this adventure of walking inside, but she knows the key phrases paper and project. Paper, project, paper, project, paper, project. She walks into the laundry room. She has no memory of being in the garage 2 seconds ago, no memory of being outside 2 seconds before that, and no memory about what started this process of walking inside or what she was trying to do. She has no access to any of that information. But she knows paper, project because she's repeating that phrase. Paper, project. She walks into the kitchen leading into the house. Paper, project, paper, project. She has no memory at this point of walking through the laundry room, walking through the garage, or walking from outside, or what she was trying to do, or why. None of that information is available to her because of how her brain and her body are automatically operating. But she has the key phrases, paper, project, paper, project, paper, project. So she walks through the house, and she knows she's looking for paper. And she knows that it's for a project. Paper, project. So even though she cannot remember the stuff leading up to this moment where she's getting the paper, she was able to create coping tricks so she could still function despite these disruptions. Our ability to understand what we were thinking a few minutes ago, what we were doing a few minutes ago, what we were just listening to, like a song or someone else speaking, our ability to connect pieces of information throughout unfolding moments depends on short-term working memory. And when dissociation disrupts those processes, it can be very challenging to automatically or instinctively connect these pieces of our unfolding realities and effectively navigate them. Among the infinite potentials of how this can impact personal experience are never-ending streams of anxiety. And this could manifest internally through sensations of the mind and the way thoughts are being processed or stimulated, and or in the body. There could be somatic sensations like tightness in the gut or other things happening. There could be all these different forms of anxiety because the unconscious body-mind is struggling to navigate unfolding moments because of how dissociation is impacting short-term working memory, accessibility, operations, etc. It's fascinating to explore these topics in my Implicit Revelations case study because of how disrupted short-term working memory was and how fluid it is now. Before, I wouldn't even be able to remember thoughts that were happening. Like I might have a great idea, and by the time I pick up my pen 3 seconds later, I have zero insight about what I was just thinking. But now, everything's so fluid and smooth, thankfully, that I can access thoughts that I was thinking hours ago. There's just this instinctive fluidity throughout step-by-step processes and innate understandings of action patterns or the way my body's maneuvering decisions, big and small. Conscious choice and all these different other components about how we maneuver connectivity between ideas and connectivity between moments based on short-term working memory operations. And so now without the dissociation, there's profound fluidity because my short-term working memory is thriving in relation to one state of consciousness when before it was being independently experienced by dozens of different people in my one physical body, and each of their accesses to short-term working memory also held glitches because of their own experiences of dissociation. So not only was the neurobiological social engagement system independently experienced by over 24 states of consciousness, but the majority of those inner persons were each struggling with their own styles of dissociation because of the trauma-related implicit neural wiring that they were automatically experiencing. So not only was the short-term working memory being shared by dozens of people, but those dozens of people were also encountering their own dissociative experiences that further increased the challenges of short-term working memory. So dissociation can manifest in literally hundreds of ways Among the infinite potentials are ways that it can affect memory processing, storage, and accessibility. And when it affects long-term memories, that can create an infinite myriad of unique dissociative experiences that may result in implicit health challenges. And or unique dissociation can impact short-term working memory, which creates disruptions regarding how we navigate moments. When you move here, is there awareness about what you were doing right here that led up to this moment here? And if that info isn't accessible, it can feel really scary. And it's helpful to understand what's happening in the brain and the body that's affecting parts of consciousness, because they are two distinct energetic components of the human experience. Parts never choose the automatic way that they're encountering themselves in life. And the brain and the body are not a personal self and experience. And so distinguishing them helps amplify our power. And then once consciousness has more power in understanding what's happening in the brain and the body, consciousness actually has enough power to interject loving presence and intentionally rewire these neural structures so there can be more power to navigate life. Dissociation is a beautiful miracle. Every component of the human experience is a beautiful miracle. When there are disruptions in our quality of life, however, we do want to look at what's happening and how we can amplify our power so consciousness has more ability to thrive in life and use the brain and the body to maneuver a magnificent experience. So there's nothing wrong with dissociation. There's nothing wrong with having short-term memory glitches. There's nothing wrong with any of these things, and we never ever need to judge or condemn ourselves or anyone else who might be encountering these unique experiences. It's a miracle just to exist at all. But once we understand what's happening, we have more power to cope with the battles that might arise through them, and also to interject the power of consciousness to gradually rewire neurobiological structures so consciousness has more power to thrive. Loving liberation is the intention. And that looks different for every individual along their own personal healing journey. It took many years of inner work before my short-term memory started to heal. During those years, if the goal was, I really just want to make my short-term working memory work again, I would not have gotten very far because there was so much inner work that preceded that goal. But understanding the neurobiological activity behind the challenges of short-term working memory amplified power because my consciousness had more compassion and loving presence and awareness and connection within themselves by understanding what was happening. So if the goal many years ago had been, I really just need my short-term working memory to work again, then I wouldn't have gotten very far because there was a lot of work that needed to go in before that could even happen. And so if the goal was getting over here, then I wouldn't have gotten very far because nothing would have been happening and I would have just wanted to give up because the goal wasn't happening. Okay? But having awareness about why these things were happening gave my aspects of consciousness power. And that power, applied in every moment of every day for years, eventually led to a place where my short-term working memory functions better than it ever has in my life. Genuinely, my abilities of memory are better than they've ever been in my entire life, and that's a miracle. But the miracle that I'm experiencing here now was only possible because consciousness harnessed its power through love and presence and used this insight to have compassion for the experience rather than trying to change it. You see the difference there? Having compassion for what's happening rather than trying to force immediate change. And that space of radical surrender opened opportunities for true healing so that that consciousness could eventually be here where I am now today. But that healing process required this consciousness of mine to accept what was happening without conditions. So we never, ever label things as good or bad or any of those dual things that can reduce our power. But we use the awareness to amplify our power from within. And so my consciousness explored ways to marvel at the miracles, even when the miracles were creating all these disruptions in everyday navigation. And that helped because it brought unity throughout the states of consciousness. The parts of consciousness weren't over there like, man, you have access to that piece of working memory and I need it to do this project, but you won't share it with me. Instead, states of consciousness were like, wow, this brain is a miracle. And even though it's navigating life very uniquely, you're going to embrace this miracle and see where things go. So even when dissociation is creating challenges in everyday life, we embrace ourselves where we are through the power of our love and presence. How and where we direct our internal energy is the only place that we ever have true power. From that space of power and embodying that personal power, anything becomes possible. But as long as we're trying to look at the explicit experience and change that, we are losing our power because we're giving our power away to a different moment and a different potential of reality that we are not in. If you're here in this experience and you're like, but I just want to be over here and have my brain work like this, then you're abandoning your presence, you're abandoning loving connection with parts of yourself, and you're saying, I would rather reject my being and wish this other thing than embody my power and create space to move towards that thing. So it's really important that we embody our power and focus on love and presence with ourselves where we are, no matter what that looks like. It does not have to be easy to be worth it. It does not have to be simple to be beautiful. The complexities and the challenges only amplify the wonder that we are and the wonder of what we can become. So even when there are immeasurable difficulties, what do we do? Any guesses? What do we do? We prioritize love and presence. And from that space of personal power, embodiment, anything and everything becomes possible without limit, without restriction. Through the power of our love and presence, unconditional self-love, unconditional presence with ourselves, all aspects of ourselves. No part left behind. Nope, not even that part back there. No part. They're all involved in this love and presence. All parts here. No part left behind. Only through the power of our unconditional love and our unconditional presence can anything and everything become possible. Even rewiring the deepest depths of neurobiological complexities. No matter what we're facing, we always have power, but the power is inside of us through the directing of our internal energy, through attention and intention. And when we focus our attention on presence in the moment and our intention on love, first pouring that into ourselves, self-love, when we prioritize attention of self-presence and intention of self-love, we are able to be there for every part of our consciousness and have power in every region of our lives from the inside out. Because how our brain and our body are operating and impacting consciousness affects everything. Navigation regarding identity, regulation through all the different flows, how we perceive things, how we respond to things, how we feel emotional sensations, how we make decisions, how we interact with other people, how we maneuver our experiences in employment situations, and everything in between and beyond. Our neurobiological applications of consciousness impact every corner of experience, and even though there's all these different elements of experience, our health, our pleasure, our success, our thriving, our this, our that, our this and our that, and our other this and that. There's all these elements of experience, but our power is not out there in the experience. Our power is right here through our internal energy. And when we direct our internal energy towards love and presence through intention and attention, we have power to influence every corner of our lives. Every corner. From transforming health challenges to chasing our dreams, everything can change when we focus on embodying our power unconditionally. It's not when things get easier, I'll embody my power. It's not when this person finally helps me, I'll embody my power. No, it's right here, right now. This moment is an opportunity. This moment is an opportunity. This moment is an opportunity. We are here in a brand new moment that's never happened ever before. This moment will never ever be here ever again. This moment is where my power is. Inside of me, through my internal energy, as I connect with my consciousness who is in this moment, I have power. But that is the only place we have true power. But when we focus on embodying that true power, we then have power to influence everything else. But we can't get our power by focusing on the everything else. We have to start inside of us. And from that space, all things become possible. It is so profoundly important to understand the neuroscience of unique dissociative experiences, so that we have more compassionate space for parts of consciousness who are within these experiences, and so that the self has more authority and power to provide internal healing for those parts of consciousness. Once we understand the neuroscience of the underlying causalities, then those neural structures can be rewired to bring healing resolution to any form of dissociation that's disrupting life in any capacity, whether it's abilities for functioning in everyday life or whether it's impacting the quality of life and abilities to feel happiness or anything in between. Understanding the underlying neuroscience of unique experiences and various forms of dissociation helps us hold compassionate space while moving through them and empowers healing transformation and loving liberation, because then there's more opportunities to transmute the neural wiring, stimulating these automated styles of personal experience. Never before in all of human history has healing been so possible. But we need to keep exploring this and bring light to the neuroscience hiding behind what we encounter on the surface. So much is happening behind the scenes, and understanding hidden realities of the unconscious body-mind expands healing potentials and infinite opportunities for personal power reclamation. Dissociation may manifest through unique forms of disorientation. When you walk into a new place, let's say you're out on a road trip and you stop at a restaurant, you're familiar with the concept of restaurants. You know in a general way that restaurants are a building and it's a business and they serve food, and you walk in and you take a seat and someone comes and asks what food you want, and after a while they bring the food to you and then you eat it and then you pay and then you leave. Or maybe it's a fast food place and you conceptually know you go and you drive your car through a drive-through, or you go inside and you give your order to someone and they take it and you pay money and then they give you a bag of food, etc. So there's this abstract conceptualization of a restaurant. So even if you go to a new restaurant that you've never been to before, you understand to some degree what to expect. Okay, but where does that information come from? How do you instinctively understand what a restaurant is? If I say the word restaurant, are you like, what is that? Restaurant. I've never heard of this. Most likely you have an instinctive knowing about what a restaurant is, more or less. That information comes from neural data. When you walk into a new place, there's an instinctive understanding about who you are, where you are, and why you are there. That information comes from neural data. For example, if you're on this road trip and you stop at a brand new restaurant you've never been to before, you understand the person that you are, the place that you are, and the reason that the person is in the place. There's all this instinctive navigation within your personal experience, okay? If you walk into a familiar place, like your home, your house, your kitchen, your living room, your bedroom, your backyard, your best friend's house where you spend a lot of time hanging out, or a familiar restaurant that you go to every week. When you walk into a familiar place, somewhere that you have spent a significant portion of time, there's an instinctive sense of familiarity. There might be this sense within your unconscious body-mind of being comfortable and relaxed, welcomed or at home, feeling a deep sense of ease or peace, or just kind of a subtle sense of connection where you feel bonded with the environment that you're in. There's an instinctive sense of familiarity and orientation. The ability to feel those things, though, depends on instinctive navigation within the unconscious body-mind, as neural data is effectively connecting within each other to translate aspects of life into particulars of personal experience. When neural data cannot thoroughly connect and effectively provide navigation, then new places and or familiar places might feel disorienting. You might walk into a store and everything feels profoundly overwhelming, but you don't know why. There's not an instinctive understanding within perceptions of the conscious mind to understand the root causalities of these sensations. But you might walk into a store and everything is so overwhelming. The sights and the sounds, nothing's really making sense. There's just a lot of overwhelming stimulus. It could be because of a unique form of dissociation where personal reality is not being effectively translated due to independent activations within neural data. So the neural wiring can't tell you, hey, you're in a store and those are a bunch of aisles and those are a bunch of lights and those are a bunch of checkout stands where there are cashiers and those are a bunch of shopping carts, and you get a shopping cart and you get the things that you want and then you go to the cashier stand. Yay! There isn't neural data connecting to tell you that. So instead you walk in this store and it's just like sights, sounds, people, things, lots of stimulus, and I don't know who I am or why I'm here or what I'm doing. But that experience is subconscious or unconscious. So there might just be feelings of overwhelm and anxiety, but you don't actually know why you're feeling that or what to do about it. New places might be overwhelming or disorienting because the neural data can't give you the basic information about who you are, where you are, and why the you is where you are. This may happen instead or also in familiar places. You might walk into your own house where you've lived for 20 years and there is not an instinctive sense of familiarity. That feeling when you walk home and you're like, I'm home. This is my house. I live here. These are walls that house me. I have memories in this place. I can be myself in this place. Those feelings aren't accessible. But you can't even hardly recognize that the feelings aren't there because they're not there. How can you recognize what isn't there? Instead, there's just kind of this gap-like feeling. And you can't necessarily specifically recognize that you don't feel a sense of familiarity in your own house. It might just be a sense of disconnection, or it might be a sense of just not feeling totally welcome to be yourself in a space. Or it might manifest as unique forms of anxiety or just feeling a sense of like you can't fully relax, but you're not entirely sure why. That could be a unique form of dissociation because unconscious navigation is disrupted and not able to effectively explain, hey, you are you, this is your house, and you're welcome to be yourself in this building. This sort of occurrence may come up in all forms of personal experience, not just in association with certain environmental settings or locations. It could happen with people or things as well. You might not recognize another person in relation to who you are, even if you've known them for decades, because of a unique form of dissociation where neural data isn't able to access this fluid connectivity that has information from all the past times you've interacted with this person to explain the sense of familiarity that you would otherwise be feeling. It might happen with objects and things. You might have this collection of things that you've had for 20 years, and instinctively, traditionally, there might be a sense when you look at it that those are my things. I am a person, and these are objects that have a sense of relationship to who I am. I bought this 10 years ago. I bought this 7 years ago. I bought this last month, and that was a cool experience. And these are things that are my things. There might not be an instinctive ability to feel those sensations or have that type of automated connection because of a unique covert form of dissociation. The neural data about those experiences where you bought that thing and you bought that thing and then you've been carrying this thing around with you for several weeks now, the neural data carrying all that information isn't able to connect. And so you look at those objects and then the translations of reality are, I don't have much of a connection with that thing. I don't know what that thing is. I don't know why I have that thing. Did I even buy that thing? I don't remember buying that thing. I don't know if this is mine, actually. Is this mine? What do I do with it? There may be all kinds of unique thoughts, feelings, sensations, etc., either conscious narration or unconscious sensations or a combination of the two, when you can't feel a sense of familiarity or orientation with people, places, things, or any elements of personal experience. Although it might not be obvious in the moment, it could be a unique form of dissociation because of disruptions within navigation of the unconscious body-mind due to independent activity within neural wiring, where all the neural wiring that would traditionally provide a fluid sense of unified navigation within unfolding moments in relation to all past experiences that have connections with one another. The translations of personal reality stem from independent data activations that aren't able to piece everything together unconsciously to effectively interpret things consciously. One of the most miraculously fascinating forms of dissociation is struggling to sustain a uniquely individualized sense of self while interacting with other people. During interpersonal engagements, the effectiveness of that external connection is profoundly dependent on the effectiveness of individual internal connections. With unique covert manifestations of dissociation, it may be difficult to sustain full contact with your own sense of self when translating your sense of self in relation to other people. For example, if you read a story about another person, there might be this unconscious or subconscious, meaning that the details of this are actually occurring beyond awareness, and the awareness might get a sensation, but won't have full access to everything that's happening. And it's important to keep that in mind when recognizing these unique experiences. So you read something about another person, and then unconsciously or subconsciously, the self is confused about who the self is in relation to this other person that was just read about. And it may create all kinds of unique sensations, and it might be difficult to decipher that this is what's happening. Behind the scenes, independent activity within the neurobiological social engagement system is disrupting translations of personal realities and experiences so that reading this thing about this other person wasn't fully and effectively translated and processed in relation to all aspects of the internal self. How do we know how to respond to other people, situations, or interactions? How does our unconscious body-mind have an instinct sensation about how to energetically perceive and respond to these external elements of personal experience? Well, that information directly depends upon the content and the connectivity of data within the neurobiological social engagement system. When some of that data lacks connectivity, there's not neural associations, so it creates some unique form of dissociation, then the information explaining who we are in relation to this experience has a hard time communicating within itself. And then the unconscious body-mind isn't quite sure how to feel about this situation. So for example, you're reading this story about another person, the unconscious body-mind might be like, wait, is this someone to be jealous of? Am I envious of this person? Is this someone I admire and I'm proud of this person? Is this a friend that I feel compassion for? Is this person a threat and someone to feel apprehensive about? The self doesn't have solidification within its entirety because all the data explaining who the self is within the neurobiological social engagement system doesn't have complete connectivity. So there's all these portions of data, and these energetic pieces of information carry a certain style of self-sense, or who the self is and how that self instinctively responds to various elements of stimulus or personal experience. And then there's this other region of data that carries different kinds of information. And so then this activation would create a unique style of who the self is and how the self responds to stimulus. And so this stimulus comes in as you're reading about this other person, and this data activates and is like, oh man, I'm jealous of them. They're a threat. But then this data over here activates and it's like, oh wow, I admire them. They're amazing. And then the self is not unified within its own self. And the unconscious body-mind doesn't know how to feel about the experience, basically. And of course, this is just one of infinite potentials of how this can manifest. Infinite examples of this unique form of dissociation where the sense of self is having a hard time connecting with itself. So it kind of dissolves and creates some form of confusion, basically. So the conscious self might just feel a sense of uneasiness or hesitation or maybe subtle anxiety or maybe slight confusion, but that might be all that's known on the surface. Meanwhile, subconscious parts are experiencing neural projections within the unconscious body-mind firsthand, and there's all these parts who are like, I'm feeling all the energetic projections of jealousy, and all these other parts in this different subconscious region are like, I'm feeling all these energetic projections of feeling admiration for this person. And so parts are having like this whole expansive experience beyond awareness, and if parts are having different styles of experience from one another, because the neural data creating projections within regions of subconscious realms that create personal experience for subconscious parts, if that data is not connected fully, then it's creating alternate or independent activity throughout the neurobiological social engagement system, and then some parts are having different experiences than others, and that can cause internal confusion and chaos. And again, it might just be really subtle, like you just kind of like feel a sense of confusion, but it also could be really overwhelming. And you could feel this full body anxiety and you're just like, I feel disoriented and I don't even know why. This moment's not a big deal, but suddenly it's a big deal. And it has to do with the covert hidden realities of activity within the unconscious body-mind. How the self instinctively relates with its own self and thus has an instinctive ability to relate to external elements of experience directly depends upon neural content and connectivity. And if that connectivity just isn't there, expansively or just through some of the regions, it can create unique styles of dissociative experiences. The sense of self might dissolve into the backdrop, and you might read something about another person and feel confused about who you are within the experience of reading this thing because your sense of self isn't fully there because some of the neural data is having a hard time connecting. And then subconscious parts are not unified within the sense of self. And so the self has a hard time learning how to associate with itself while interacting with this external experience. If the sense of self dissolves because neural associations aren't able to explain the self to its own self, then the self can have a hard time understanding how to relate with external elements of experience. And you might read something about another person and you might think you are that person. Or you might think you're not a person at all and this other person's the only person exists. It can create all kinds of unique experiences, and it might be manifestations of dissociation, but it won't necessarily feel that way. Another example is when you're interacting with someone, you're having a conversation with another person. There might be subconscious sensations that the self exists only in relation to this other person. The sense of self is only a conceptualization in association or affiliation with this other person and or with this one interaction. Because the neural data can't access all information about all parts of the entire self. And so the experience is being processed independently, and then the self is only one aspect of the self existing in dependent relationship to this other person and or this interaction. The sense of self is struggling to exist independently due to a unique form of dissociation because personal experience is being processed through independent regions of neural activity. Being lost in a conversation where your sense of self basically dissolves and then only partially exists in relation to this external experience can produce all kinds of unique dissociative clues, including anxiety. Another way this unique form of dissociation might manifest is by perceiving energetic attributes of another person in the space or in the place of your own sense of self. So for example, you walk up to somebody and you perceive their energetic attributes, and that becomes the entire reality of that moment. Rather than you being solidified in your entire sense of self as a physical person, perceiving another independent person. So there's kind of these two elements to it. The first one is that your sense of self dissolves. You are no longer solidified in the entirety of your own sense of self. And that alone can feel like a lot of different things. And then the second feature of this unique dissociative experience is rather than perceiving another physical person who is distinct, separate, and independent from the you that you are, you perceive their energetic attributes, and that reality consumes your reality. And this could be described as an extreme form of being an empath, where you take on other people's emotions and sensations. But basically what happens in this unique form of dissociation is you're seeing the energy of the other person. You are energy. You're no longer a physical self with this solidified sense of this is who I am, and I'm confident and I'm calm, and I'm, you have all these attributes to who you are, and you have your personal preferences, and you have your backstory of things that shaped you into who you are today, and all of that's connected, and you're connected with yourself here and now and who you are and the physical body you're in. That kind of dissolves, and you're kind of just this abstract energy. You're not all of you. You're kind of just this abstract conceptualization of a potential self. And then instead of seeing this other independent physical person, you're perceiving the energy of their attributes. And so you could describe that as their aura, or you could just describe it as unique brain activity inside of you, where you're seeing energy instead of physicality. There's different ways to describe this, but within the experience, basically what happens is you look at someone, and maybe you're looking in their eyes, for example, and you might energetically perceive a sensation of anger and rage. So in that moment, for example, you are no longer you seeing another person. You're an abstract conceptualization of generalized energy, fully absorbed in an energetic experience of someone else's rage. And then your sense of self feels like a sensation of either rage or fear, either what they're feeling or an emotional response to what they're feeling. And so you're basically just experiencing this one abstract energy rather than your sense of self and their sense of self interacting. Okay? Unique form of dissociation, the sense of self dissolves, and because of that, the self responds to experience by taking on elements of the experience. And this might also involve brain hemispheric imbalance. For example, if the right brain is having amplified or independent activity, then the brain is more likely to perceive energetic elements of experience rather than physical elements of experience. I talk a little bit about this in a previous thesis statement, so please do feel free to explore that and its bonus features in this documentary series. A unique way that this form of dissociation can manifest is by perceiving energetic attributes of other people as your sense of self, or in place of your sense of self, rather than being a solidified sense of you who's distinct from experience and independent of these other people. And so instead of I am me here, seeing another physical person, it's I'm energy and I'm experiencing their energy, and that's my whole reality. And it can feel very all-consuming and very overwhelming and very difficult to respond. Without a sense of self, how do you distinguish you from them? And how do you distinguish you from experience? So it can feel really difficult to know how to respond to some of these unique experiences without the neurobiological activity fully supporting consciousness to amplify power from within. And so being able to recognize what's happening and then understand why provides so much more power to effectively navigate unique experiences, to fully be there for parts of consciousness who are directly within these unfolding moments. In summary, dissociation may cause difficulties sustaining access to a uniquely individualized sense of self when interacting with other people. The sense of self may completely dissolve, and or a sense of self may be directly associated with elements of the other person or the interaction. Either way, it can reduce access to all aspects of self, and it can feel like personal power is less accessible because the sense of self feels dependent on this external interaction, rather than the sense of self being independent and having a whole bunch of its own power. The sense of self might, potentially, one of infinite examples of course, the sense of self might dissolve and thus become attached to elements of experience. And so instead of me being all of Kristen interacting with you, hi, nice to meet you, I, for example, might suddenly become only a person in relation to this interaction, which means when this interaction ends, I won't have a sense of self, and that can feel scary. And so this unique form of dissociation might lead to other types of unique experiences. For example, there might be this feeling that you need to be around other people to feel okay. And it might just be very generalized. There could be action patterns of, I just really want to call a friend right now, or I just really want to be in someone's company right now. Or there might be emotional sensations of sadness or loneliness or anxiety. Basically, implicit memory data is carrying these sensations and action patterns because of unfulfilled attachment needs that are causing the unconscious body-mind to need to be around other people in order to feel relief within its sense of self, because the sense of self is having a hard time connecting from within. And external stimulus of interacting with other people can temporarily bring relief to that. So again, one of infinite potentials of what may happen. But if the sense of self dissolves and the unconscious body-mind feels anxious about that, but certain kinds of stimulus, like interacting with a good friend, help to bring a sense of self, because then you're a sense of self in relation to this person or in relation to this experience, then there might be these unique styles of experience where you just always feel like you need to be around this other person all the time, and that helps you feel okay. And you might not know anything more than that. It could just feel like, oh, I just really like my friend. But there's all this other activity happening in the unconscious body-mind, and subconscious parts are actually suffering because of the way neural data is wired. And figuring out how the neural data is wired, how that's impacting subconscious parts, and how to help parts while rewiring the neural data is really the best route here, rather than being codependent on another person. But that might not be obvious because most of it's happening beyond awareness. And so bringing this information to light can help amplify personal power along any type of journey. So much is happening beyond awareness, and only once we dive into these hidden realities can we have more opportunities to be there for these parts of ourselves. There's so many parts of ourselves having experiences beyond awareness, and until we understand more about that, it can feel challenging to know how to be there for ourselves. So understanding these hidden subconscious realities gives us more power to be there for subconscious parts, so we can understand their realities and help transform them in whatever way helps parts feel liberated to fully be who they truly are. Another way dissociation might manifest is having someone else's experience feel more real or immediate than your own personal experience. rather than being fully present in your own body and your own uniquely individualized sensation of personal experience that's unique to you and your being and the way your brain and body are interpreting your sense of self and how the self relates to unfolding moments of reality, your sensation of personal experience might be more so affiliated with how someone else is experiencing their version of the now. For example, one time I was hiking. I was on my feet, walking along this path. I visually saw somebody riding on a horse. Rather than me being grounded in my personal experience of walking, where I could feel my feet on the ground and understand who I was, where I was, and what I was doing, my unconscious body-mind suddenly started creating these sensations, suggesting that I was that person riding that horse. It's very, very unique, stemming from unique neurobiological activity.